There is a story inside the British royal family that most people think they already know. They think they know how it began, who was guilty, who was innocent, and how everything eventually settled into a kind of uneasy peace. But the truth is messier than that. The truth involves a man who has stayed silent for decades while the world wrote his story for him. It involves a prince who grew up watching everything fall apart and decided, quietly, deliberately, that he would never let it happen again. And it involves a family, the Parker Bowles family, that stepped through the golden doors of the monarchy and found, one by one, that those doors could close just as quickly as they had opened. The man at the center of this story is Brigadier Andrew Parker Bowles. He is 86 years old now. He served in the British Army for over 3 decades. He is a decorated officer, a man of aristocratic background, and the former husband of the woman who is today Queen Camilla. For 30 years, he said almost nothing publicly about his marriage, his divorce, or the extraordinary circumstances that surrounded both. He watched documentaries get made. He watched books get written. He watched television dramas reconstruct the most intimate and painful moments of his personal life for mass entertainment. And through all of it, Andrew Parker Bowles remained composed, dignified, and almost entirely silent. That silence has always been significant. Because when a man chooses not to speak for 30 years about something the entire world is talking about, the silence itself becomes a kind of statement. It tells you that he understood the weight of what he knew. It tells you that he understood the institution he had once served, and the institution his children were now connected to through their mother. And it tells you that he was watching, carefully, patiently, as the years unfolded and the truth in pieces began to come out anyway. Andrew Parker Bowles was born on 27 December 1939 and served in the British Army, retiring at the rank of brigadier. He married Camilla Shand in 1973, and the couple divorced in 1995. What is rarely discussed in the straightforward recounting of those dates is the full texture of what that marriage meant and what ended it. The public version of the story has always been simple. Camilla loved Charles, Charles loved Camilla, they were separated by duty and circumstance, and eventually they found their way back to each other at great cost to everyone around them. Andrew Parker Bowles in this version is a supporting character, a man who was in the way, a man who lost. Wikipedia. But that reading leaves out a great deal. Charles and Camilla were first introduced in 1965 and began dating in the early 1970s. However, Charles eventually had to leave for Royal Navy service, and Camilla moved on with Andrew Parker Bowles. The couple got engaged shortly after meeting and married in July 1973. What is notable here is the timeline. Camilla did not simply drift into her marriage with Andrew after her relationship with Charles faded. She made a choice. She built a life. She had children. 1 year after their wedding, the couple welcomed their son Tom, and their daughter Laura arrived in 1978. For over 2 decades, this was her family. This was the life she had chosen. Yahoo! Yahoo! And Andrew Parker Bowles, by all accounts, was not simply a passive figure in that life. He was an active, socially connected, independently prominent man with his own circle, his own career, and his own complicated relationship with the Windsor world. Even after their 1995 divorce and both going on to marry other people, the former couple maintained a cordial relationship, and Andrew remained on good terms with many members of the royal family, especially Princess Anne. His relationship with the Windsors became so close that he sometimes represented them at official events. That detail alone says something remarkable. Here is a man whose ex-wife married the future King of England, and yet he was still trusted enough to represent members of the royal family at formal occasions. That is not the biography of a bitter, discarded husband. That is the biography of a man who understood the game, played it with extraordinary discipline, and maintained his dignity through circumstances that would have broken most people. AOL. While Camilla and Andrew were married for over 2 decades, they split in December 1994 after she secretly rekindled her romance with Charles. Reports also alleged that the British Army officer had his own extramarital affairs during the marriage. The collapse of the marriage, in other words, was not a clean story of one innocent party and one guilty one. It was a complicated human situation involving 2 people who had, in different ways, maintained connections outside the formal boundaries of their union. This is the part of the story that the simplified version tends to skip past. It is much easier to tell a love story about Charles and Camilla if Andrew is simply the obstacle. But he was never just an obstacle. He was a person with a full life who found himself at the center of one of the most scrutinized romantic dramas in modern British history. Yahoo! When the divorce was finalized in 1995, Andrew Parker Bowles chose silence. Not the silence of defeat, but the silence of a man who understood that speaking would change nothing for the better and might damage a great deal. He watched his children grow up navigating the extraordinary position their mother's second marriage had placed them in. Tom Parker Bowles and his sister Laura are the children of Camilla and her ex-husband Andrew Parker Bowles, making both of them step-siblings to the current heir to the throne, Prince William, as well as Prince Harry, who stepped down as a senior working royal in 2020. Tyler, that word, step-siblings, is technically accurate, but it tells you almost nothing about the actual texture of the relationship. Because from the moment Camilla entered the Windsor world formally, the question of how her children would fit into it became one of the most delicate and unresolved tensions within the family, and at the center of that tension stood Prince William. William's complicated feelings toward Camilla are well documented. They stretch back to his childhood, to his mother's suffering, to the years he spent watching his family fracture around an affair that the whole world knew about. Ever since Prince William was first introduced to Camilla by his father in 1998, while on a break from Eton, there have been endless questions about how their relationship has developed. Royal commentator Christopher Anderson, who wrote about King Charles, described Camilla as having been shaking like a leaf during that encounter, and noted that as soon as William left, she reportedly said she needed a gin and tonic. That image, the future queen, nerve-wracked and reaching for a drink after meeting a 17-year-old boy, tells you something important about the power William held in that dynamic, even as a teenager. Even then, his approval mattered. Even then, his forgiveness was something that had to be earned. Irish Star. Both William and Harry had always distrusted Camilla and felt resentment toward her because of their devotion to their mother. They never felt comfortable opening up to her in any real way. Over time, the relationship between William and Camilla did soften somewhat. The tensions with Harry and Meghan, paradoxically, drew William and Camilla closer in some respects, united by a shared sense of institutional loyalty and a shared concern about the direction Harry was taking the family. A Parker Bowles family friend noted that it was really Kate who warmed William to Camilla. Catherine's steadying influence, her genuine warmth, her ability to find common ground, these things helped build bridges that William alone might never have built. The Seattle Times. But warmth and trust are two different things. And William's actions in the years following his father's coronation made clear that while he might have found a working relationship with Camilla herself, his relationship with her wider family and her influence on the institutions he would one day inherit was another matter entirely. In a significant administrative decision, Prince William, as Duke of Cornwall, removed Annabel Elliot, Queen Camilla's sister, from the Duchy of Cornwall payroll. Annabel Elliot is Camilla's younger sister, an interior designer who had been working on royal properties for nearly 2 decades. After William's father, King Charles, ascended to the throne in 2022, the prince inherited the Duchy of Cornwall, a royal estate with an estimated worth of over $1 billion, and since taking ownership, William removed Elliot from the payroll. The Royal Observer. Fox News. The official explanation offered was measured and deliberately non-confrontational. Sources confirmed that William would no longer employ Annabel Elliot, though they stressed it was no reflection on her work. These sources added that her work was viewed as complete and that staff had sufficiently learned from her expertise. But the timing and the context of this decision made it impossible to read as a simple administrative matter. Annabel Elliot had been brought in specifically because of her connection to Camilla. She had held this position throughout Charles's tenure as Duke of Cornwall, and the moment William took control of the estate, she was gone. MEAWW. Shortly after removing Camilla's sister from the payroll, William brought in his own people, specifically Harry Aubrey Fletcher, godfather to Prince Louis, and William Van Cutsem, godfather to Prince George, in advisory roles at the Duchy of Cornwall estate. Read that sequence again. He removed Camilla's family. He installed his own. This was not an accident. This was a deliberate restructuring of the people around one of the most significant and valuable estates in Britain. It was a statement about whose family this institution now belonged to and whose loyalties would shape its future. The Royal Observer. Within the palace, sources noted that Camilla's reaction to this was not positive. From Camilla's perspective, the Waleses pushed themselves forcefully into issues that were not theirs to control, and she felt that in doing so they weakened both her standing and the king's authority within the family. This is a remarkable thing to say about your own stepson. It suggests a woman who felt that the natural order, in which she and Charles held authority, and William was still the heir-in-waiting, deferential and patient, was being disrupted. But William was no longer simply waiting. He was acting. He was making decisions. He was reshaping the landscape around him in ways that made clear he had a vision for what the monarchy should look like when it became his. AOL. Insiders told journalists that open warfare had erupted between the Princess of Wales and Queen Camilla, with palace aides saying the tensions dated back to a moment during the state visit of Donald Trump to Britain. The public rarely sees these moments. What they see is the coordinated smiles at formal events, the careful standing arrangements in official photographs, the scripted warmth of public appearances. What they do not see is what happens in the rooms behind those photographs. What they do not see is the negotiations, the slights, the conversations that go unrecorded but whose effects ripple outward for months. AOL. Reports indicated that Camilla's behavior at one point raised William's hackles significantly. A source noted that while his relationship with his stepmother had really evolved since those difficult early years, the fact that she was now disrespecting his wife was putting it to the test again. The woman William had slowly, painstakingly built a working relationship with had, in his view, crossed a line. And when someone crosses a line with William, the response is not explosive or public. It is quiet and structural. It is the removal of a sister from a payroll. It is the replacement of one family's people with another family's people. It is the slow, careful redrawing of boundaries. Stallcaster. Meanwhile, on the other side of this equation stood Tom Parker Bowles, Andrew's son, Camilla's son, a food writer and restaurant critic who occupies one of the strangest positions in modern British public life. He is the stepbrother of the future king. He sat in Westminster Abbey at the coronation and held history in his hands. Tom's stepfather, King Charles, is also his godfather, and Freddie Parker Bowles, Tom's son, played a role in the coronation ceremony as a page. And yet Tom himself has been at pains to make clear that he does not consider himself part of the royal family, and does not seek to be. Royal Insider. Tom Parker Bowles told journalists that he and his family are married into the royal world, but are not the royal family. We live in 2024, and blended families are a little bit different from the days of Victoria and Edward, he said. If they're happy, then we're happy, and that's where it all starts from. It is a gracious and politically intelligent thing to say. But it also reflects a reality that has been made very plain to Tom and his family, that the boundaries of who belongs and who does not belong are drawn with great care, and are enforced by the people who will one day hold the most power. AOL. According to reports, William has gone as far as indicating he would not attend royal family Christmas celebrations if Camilla invited Tom, and a source previously noted that it is best to avoid mentioning Tom around William. That is an extraordinary thing to exist in a family. That is a stepbrother so unwelcome in certain company that his name itself is a source of tension. Tom, for his part, seems to understand this. He has said that he learned a long time ago not to put his fat fingers into the world of William and Harry. It was appalling what they went through, he said. I've had a billionth of what they had to go through, but I sympathize. The list. News break. There is something deeply human in that statement. Here is a man who watched his mother navigate one of the most hostile public environments imaginable, who watched his family become tabloid fodder, royal scandal, television drama, who watched his own stepbrothers live out the consequences of choices that their parents and his made decades ago. And rather than claiming solidarity or proximity or kinship, he steps back. He says, I know my place. I have learned where the lines are drawn. And then there is Andrew Parker Bowles, the man who started all of this, who was at the center of all of this, and who has watched all of this from a careful distance. The man who served as a page at Queen Elizabeth's coronation in 1953, and who lived to see his own grandchildren serve as pages at King Charles's coronation 70 years later. 3 of his grandchildren had starring roles in the 2023 coronation. His grandsons Louis and Gus Lopes, and Freddie Parker Bowles, and Andrew himself attended, the former husband of the new queen, present in the very ceremony that completed the transformation of his ex-wife into one of the most powerful women in Britain. AOL, what does a man think, sitting in Westminster Abbey, watching the woman he was once married to be crowned? What does a man think when he watches his grandchildren carry the ceremonial weight of a monarchy that he served, that he understood from the inside, that he left, or was left by, under circumstances that the entire world has an opinion on? Andrew and Camilla had remained cordial, and he was on good terms with many members of the royal family even after the divorce, representing them at official events over the years. He had maintained that dignity, that composure, that extraordinary disciplined silence. AOL, for 30 years, through all of it, through the documentary exposés, through the Diana years, through the death that shook the world, through the slow rehabilitation of Camilla's image from villain to accepted consort to queen, through his own second marriage, through the death of his second wife, through the quiet years of his 80s, Andrew Parker Bowles watched and said almost nothing.